By the end of this video, I want you to know 3 things that school did not teach you. But first, as always, subscribe, stick around to the end, and check out the link in the description for my new self-improvement science Discord community. And the first thing that school did not teach you was the concept of health and delayed gratification. Now, while you may have been taught this stuff in school quite a bit, in my school, these 2 terms were very rarely mentioned whatsoever. And because many people's learning styles are not suited to the school system, they end up struggling in school quite a lot, and so they sort of indulge in these external and unhealthy pleasures, which end up really being to their detriment in the long term. And it also is just a way for them to sort of forget the issues that they're experiencing with the school system, because they just don't really feel like school is for them. And constantly doing these external pleasures over an extended period of time leads to addictions, which they'll end up carrying on into later life, which are unhealthy and will end up really reducing their lifespan since they started at such a young age. And the way schools have dealt with these kind of addictions over the years has changed dramatically. Schools nowadays don't really care what kids do, as long as they don't really do it inside a school which would harm their reputation quite a lot. And now, because of this sort of lack of enforcing the rules, these kids feel like they're sort of allowed to enjoy themselves. And while enjoying yourselves, having a bit of fun as a young kid is not such a bad thing, doing these unhealthy things which are going to take decades of years off of your lifespan is not something that should sort of be just allowed and pushed and brushed under the rug whatsoever. And another thing is that school never really mentioned the sort of plastic chemicals, the harmful chemicals that are in our society that nobody really knows about. The BPAs, the PVCs, the BPSs, the BPFs, all this kind of stuff was never really mentioned, along with the sort of DDTs and pesticides that now, while they are banned, are still kind of present in many foods, just to the fact that they've sort of been recirculated through composting and recycling throughout the years. And this is probably because many schools are government run, and often in the modern day, at least in the UK, the schools are quite underfunded, and so they would have to buy things like the cheap plastics, the BPAs, the phthalates, all that kind of stuff that is going to harm young kids' health, simply because they're not given enough money by the government to actually be able to sort of buy these normal healthy equipment that doesn't put synthetic chemicals inside of our body. And this only really applies to things like primary schools, secondary schools, infant schools, because when you get into sort of college and university, if you're taking subjects like science, you're going to end up learning a lot more deeper into the sort of harmful synthetic chemicals, and you're going to learn that this stuff is often in our environment. And while you're not really taught much of this stuff in the sort of secondary schools when you're sort of 16, when you sort of get into the late teen years and your early 20s, if you are taking things like science in university, you're probably going to end up hearing or learning about this stuff. And if you don't, that may be even more cause for concern if these really common chemicals aren't even talked about in the most sort of deep of biology or chemistry courses whatsoever. And the second thing that school never taught you to do was how to self-learn. And this really only applies to like the younger schools, the primary schools, the secondary schools, because in these schools you always have an authority figure, a teacher that's giving you the guiding hand. And when you end up going home to do your homework, you've probably all had the homework experience where you're sort of sitting there not really having a clue how you're supposed to do your homework, because you've always had this authority figure to help you throughout your entire education and learning experience. And this means you always have to call your parents in, and you end up crying because you have no idea how to do this tricky, difficult homework. I feel like that's something that probably everyone has experienced, no matter how smart or naturally academically gifted you are, simply because we as like students aren't really taught how to self-learn. We're not really taught how to study or revise effectively. And then when it is time for exams to come, things like the standardized academic tests or whatever, GCSEs, A-levels, we're then sort of thrown in the deep end with how the fact that we've got to spend a lot of our after school hours, a lot of our out of school hours revising and studying for these massive exams. And we are kind of thrown in the deep end with all the stuff, which being thrown in the deep end can be beneficial to sort of suffering, growing through discomfort and all that sort of stuff. But the fact that many people believe that all these things like GCSE exams, A-level exams are such a life-defining thing, whether you get good grades or not means you're going to have a good career and all that kind of stuff. Some people swim and some people don't. Some people will be able to last the discomfort and suffering that you see in the deep end by being thrown into this fact that we have to sort of start to self-learn and study for exams and some people won't. Some people won't last, some people won't swim, some people won't know how to study, and they'll end up having the same homework experience that they had 2 to 3 years ago back in their younger primary schools, now in their sort of secondary school. Their GCSE exams are upcoming, and it's going to be a same stressful experience that is just not good. And I really think that we should all learn how to sort of be able to sort of teach ourselves through things like reading books, through things like just studying things that sort of are important to us that aren't really talked about in school. Maybe it's like interest in science, or an interest in the gym or dieting and all that kind of stuff. If you educate yourself on topics that interest you, you'll naturally be able to sort of self-learn topics that school ends up throwing at you in the future. And the fact that school doesn't teach people how to self-learn really puts them at a disadvantage when it is time for them to leave the education system. They won't have that sort of guiding hand anymore, and they have to learn things for themselves. They have to get their financial education to be able to sort of have a wealthy and maybe potentially free life. And the fact that 50% of people don't really read a book or pick up a book once they graduate college or university or secondary school or whatever, that shows that people don't really know how to self-learn or educate themselves, because they've always had this guiding hand that's sort of helping them through their education system journey, other than when they've sort of had to be thrown in the deep end and study for upcoming exams or whatever. And the third thing that school never really taught you was social skills. Many people nowadays are becoming homeschooled because some people are realizing that it might actually be a beneficial thing to not sort of be put through and indoctrinated by the school system. And because you're not around so many people every single day while being homeschooled, you're quite socially deprived. You don't really talk to many people other than your family that much. It means that when you sort of do go outside, you go to clubs, you go to societies, you go to social events, you're going to end up being much more social, because your social battery is just like overflowing. It's so full, and you want to sort of talk to people, and now they will just actually have the chance to talk to someone else, which will not be something they've really experienced that much in a while. But when you're in school, you're around all these people that you know, you've been in school with them for maybe 5, 4, 3, 2, however many years. You end up becoming used to each other's company, and your company doesn't really matter that much, and it just loses its value over time. You sit next to each other in class, but you're not actually really friends, and you don't actually talk to each other outside of school or whatever. And this means that so many people who are inside of school, because they have company with every single minute of the day, it ends up meaning that when they sort of get home from school, they don't really want to do too many social things, because they've just been at school around 500 other people all day, and this doesn't really give them the opportunity to practice actual social skills with strangers. And so when it's time for them to leave the education system or move to a new school, they end up struggling because they haven't had the opportunity to sort of practice social skills on people they haven't really known and sort of been put in a class together with for a while, and this puts them at a massive disadvantage when they actually get into the real world. But someone who's homeschooled will end up sort of socially immersing almost immediately and assimilating immediately with any new people that they meet when they sort of go to they actually do go to like a college or university or whatever, because they've been so socially deprived for so long. I guess school just kind of assumed that if you put a bunch of kids in a classroom together, they'd end up getting along nicely, they may become friends, and they will end up forming lifelong relationships and seeing each other outside of school. But simply because they've got this company every single minute of every single day, they don't really feel the need to sort of see each other outside of school, because they're spending 6 hours of the day already with each other. And this just means when it comes to holidays, summer holidays, people don't really organize any meetups or anything, because you've just been seeing each other for like 6 hours per day for like 180 days or whatever throughout the last year or so. But if there is one simple social skill that I've learned over my time of reading books and just experiencing the world in general, I must say being a good listener is probably one of the most important things you could ever do. And this is quite good if you're an introvert, because it doesn't mean you have to be really outgoing and extroverted and draining your social battery all the time. You simply have to just participate in a conversation like a normal person, but don't really interrupt and be the sort of loud, annoying person that sort of just makes these weird noises or whatever, like you may see in your schools. Just being a good listener and still like partaking in the conversation, replying to whatever they say or their questions, but being a good listener, sort of letting them talk about the things that they want to talk about, will make you a much more liked person than whatever you could possibly imagine. But yeah, that's about all. That's 3 things: social skills, health and delayed gratification, as well as self-learning. that school didn't really teach you. And so I hope you enjoyed the video. If you want to join the self-improvement community, it is in the link below in the Discord community. It's just a little Discord link. You can click on that and join. It should be all right and working. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed, and I also recommend subscribing because I love this community of young tribal people who are willing to improve themselves so much more than they already have. And good luck.